I'm Michael Stahnke, VP of Engineering at Flox. Today, I'm excited to announce Flox builds and publish as part of our Flox for Teams offering that's also available for individuals to try out for free. Hopefully, you've already had the power and experience of using a Flox environment to have consistent dependencies across operating systems and across architectures and with colleagues, so that you no longer have the works on my machine problem, but now it works on your machine as well. Well, if you've been using that for a while, you've noticed that we have a giant software catalog that's powered by Nix packages, but that doesn't mean that every piece of software is available for it. And so if you want to put your own content inside of a Flox environment, we now have a method to do that. Traditionally, builds with Nix are pretty complex, and we've created a different system that you can start with to get your software working within Flox. To start with, if you can make a build work inside of a Flox environment at all, we're pretty sure we can get you a package. So let's take a look at how that might work. So I was looking for something that was not in Nix packages, and that was this thing called Noxter. This is a ncurses type interface for disk usage and utilization. It's very pretty. It's got colors and it's ASCII, and it's just the kind of thing that I would like to use, but it wasn't in Nix packages. And so I thought, hey, maybe I could package this up. So I'm going to jump over here to my terminal and walk through how I might do that. To start with, I'll just take a look at this. I've cloned it out, and it's a Go project. Okay, I'm pretty familiar with Go, so that's probably a good start for me. I don't have Go available on my path right now, but what I have done is created an environment that has Go in it. And so if I do a Flox list, you'll see that it has make and Go because I think that's the only things that I need to make this thing work. So before I attempt any type of build within Flox, let's just see if I can make this work. Using only these dependencies. Okay, I type make. I'm just going to make build and see and hope that that works. It looks like it did. I'm going to run something here. Okay, so that's working. I'm not going to let this thing process everything. It has to do a full disk index and everything. But once it has an index, it's actually pretty neat. So I'm going to, I can make a build work. And so if you saw the command there was make. I think it was make build, and that was what I did. So let's add some instructions for how to do that. To do that, you need a new top level directive in your manifest called build. And I'm just going to name this build.noxter because that's the package that I'm trying to make. Um, and so what's my command to make this build happen? Well, it was make build, right? That was what worked. Okay. Well, how do I know what to package after that? Because obviously this whole directory has a lot of things in it. So what we do is we introduce this concept that we call $out. And if you're familiar with Nix builds, $out is nothing new. It's basically the root of the file system hierarchy that you want to have for your package. And so it's basically just, hey, put everything here that you want us to vacuum up and put inside of a package. So I'm going to mkdir-p $out. And I'm actually just going to make the bin directory because I know that's what I'm going to need. And then I am going to copy the bin noxdir into $out bin when I'm done. And that should result in a build that works. I'm going to give it a description. This is an optional field, but it does help if people are searching or something else. So I'll just take the description right here in this about and put that in my terminal here. And then I'm going to give it a version. Looks like it's version 0.1.3. So I will add that version v0.1.3. Okay. So now I have a version, I have a description, and I have a build command. And I think this should result in a build. So let's try it out. So first we validate the environment. All right. So I am going to run Flox build. And let's just see if that works out the way I want it to. Okay, it looks like it's created. And if you're, again, familiar with Nix builds, it uses this result nomenclature, which I guess comes from just having a result in a symlink, so you don't have to figure out where it is in the Nix store. But if you saw, we have this result Noxter and logs. So we have logs as a separate output from the way that we do the build. So if you want to see what happened, you always have a complete record of how that build occurred. So I'm going to just attempt to run this file. It does appear to work, so that's a great start. So it looks like I have a complete build of Noxter. Now, if I would like that available for someone else to consume or for me to consume on another machine, I need to publish that. And when you publish that into what we call a catalog, or just to your own account or to your own organization, however you would like to do that. So I'm going to run Flox publish. Um, and I think if that's all I do, okay, this is a pretty common state to get into is, hey, this environment has some things that are not tracked somewhere else. So because Nix and Flox want to guarantee reproducibility of your build to the best of our abilities, we need to know that this has changes that are not only locally available on your host, they're available anywhere. And so we put some safety checks in here, and it's things like, hey, you have stuff that has changed. So I'm just going to add the little changes I made to Flox here, git commit, update Flox, M to have build instructions. I'm going to push to my remote, and that is the one that we're using here. Um, and then I will try to Flox publish. And when you're doing a publish, what it does under the hood is it actually fetches from that URI to make sure that it has the same commit, and then it does a build. And after it builds, it has the artifact and it uploads it to our system. Our system does a little more verification on it to make sure it's traceable. We don't need to look at your source code. All we need to do is know that there's a URI that is referenceable. So this is one of the cool things about the way that Flox publishes packages is you have private source code. We don't want to see it. We don't need to see how you got the build. Once you have the build, then you can upload it. And now by default, you're going to upload it to a multi-tenant cache that we have that's available for our users. But if you're a customer that has different needs, come talk to us. We have ways of keeping you all of your data within your confines, or if you want to just not set up infrastructure and not deal with that, you can use our infrastructure. We'll meet you where you are on that one. So you can see now that I can run Flox install Stahnke Noxter if I wanted to install it. So I'm just going to search for this first and see, does it show up? It does. You can see it's the very first thing. It's a terminated utility for visualizing file system usage. Okay, so that looks pretty available. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create my new env. Flox install Stahnke / Noxter. And you'll see that it only installed for systems that were Mac based on ARM. That's because I didn't build it for anything else. And so it says, hey, I tried to, by default, Flox wants to lock for every system type we know about. And so it says, hey, we know about x86 and ARM for Linux and Mac, but I only see ARM on Mac available. So that's all I'm going to, incorporate and reference into this environment, which I think is fine. So now if I activate, which Noxter, and you can see it's right there. So I should be able to run it again, and I can run it standalone away from that path. So that's great. Now, one thing that you may have noticed is that this worked by basically running the same commands that a user would run. And so I run make build, I make this directory, I put my stuff into $out, and that's the end. Now, the way that we guarantee this works is we actually include everything in your developer environment in this final package. And in some cases, that's a lot too much to ship around and carry around because you may need a bunch of things during build time that you don't need during runtime. If you have linters or CI tools or special compilers or things like that, you probably don't need them in every invocation of this package. And so to do that, you can turn on purity or you can turn on sandbox builds. Sandboxing is basically a protection that says, hey, if you're talking to the network, this is known, or you can't talk to the network, or you're talking to things that are outside of what's declared in this environment. If you're linking against a system library instead of one that's in the environment, because that system library may be different if I'm on a different version of Mac OS than my colleague is. That library may have changed over time. And so we want to guarantee reproducibility to the best of our abilities. So let's look at a more advanced example for this exact same project. And so I'm just going to delete this and I'm going to add in a couple of new things. Now, when you install Go, underneath that closure, it's actually pulling in a few other dependencies. And I'm going to be explicit about that for a reason that will make more sense in just a minute. But basically, there are a few libraries in Go that assume that no matter where it's running, it always has access to things like Mailcap and TZ data and Etsy services. And so I'm just going to make sure that those are there for, again, and I'll show you more about that in just a moment. Now, to get the build here, we're going to actually define a multi-stage build. And multi-stage means I have one build that's going to happen a little bit impurely where it fetches dependencies from the network. And then I'm going to lock those dependencies in an artifact. And that artifact will be an input into my final build of Noxter. This should seem pretty familiar if you've ever done Nix packaging. If you haven't done it, you can think of it as, okay, I want to go get everything from the network that might change later, and I'm actually going to lock that on my system locally so that I have a reference to that. And so that the next time we do a build, somebody else doesn't need to go out to the network. Because if you go ask for a package from Go or from NPM or any other type of upstream package manager, you might get a different version the next time you ask for it. So I've pasted in a bunch here, but I'll walk through it. All right, I'm going to start with, I'm going to build dependencies, and then I'm going to build Noxter. And so for dependencies, all I'm doing here is saying, hey, go get my dependencies and put them in $out. And I'm going to just run go mod download, and I'm going to make the cache to be read write. Now over here, I have, hey, I'm going to set my go mod cache, and you can see this magic kind of dollar brackets Noxter depths is referencing the previous package. So it'll build a graph and say, hey, I need to do the dependencies before I do this second package. And I think that's a really helpful feature. We're going to make the directory. We're going to trim the path here, because if we don't trim the path, our little filters and warning signals will say, hey, you're referencing paths that may not be available for somebody else. And so Go has this option to just trim paths so you don't have basically embedded R paths and things. And we're going to put this over in $out bin and change it. So you can see that here I've changed the sandbox setting to pure. And this version string is just, this is just the number of commits I had since the version 1.3 came out. And I had my own description that was a little different than what we had before. Now, here's where a little bit of magic happens in this thing called runtime packages. And so once this program is built, we don't need Go and we don't need make, because those are only used at build time. But what we do need are things that may be referenced by a package. And we just don't have a way of knowing if any Go projects are going to reference things like TZ data or mailcap or Etsy services. So I'm just going to put those in here. They're very small anyway. And they're pretty much probably going to be on the system, but I want to be explicit about that, because our whole thing is we want to be explicit about dependencies, not implicit. I don't want it to happen to work. I want to make sure it's going to work. So let's try these builds. I'm going to quit out of there. Again, we validate the environment. I'm going to add Flox because I've made changes. Support multi-stage pure build. I'm going to push that to my username. And now I'm going to first run a build. Before I do a publish, I like to just kind of do a build, make sure that everything's working the way that I want it to. You can see it's building this Noxter depths. It doesn't have a version string, so it just assumes it's 000, which is totally acceptable. And then when I do an ls, you see that I have all of these little symlinks that result -Noxter and build cache and logs and all that. So the packages did seem to work, and I will just validate that quickly by attempting to run this. And again, it runs, so I feel pretty good about that. And now I'm going to run flox build clean, which is a command that's going to get rid of all those symlinks and basically say, hey, your project should be more or less pristine at this point. And if you see I do git status, I don't have anything. It does say I'm ahead of main or of base, because that's where the upstream came from, and I have my own fork of this project at this point. So I'm going to do flox publish Noxter. So I've done a flox publish Noxter, and what's happening under the hood here is it's doing a quick build, and then it will upload the artifact, and we'll get a bunch of signal back. And so you can see it's waiting for a confirmation of a successful publish. This takes just a few seconds. We're uploading content. We're validating it on our end. It's getting signed with a key. All of those things that need to happen for security and chain of custody. And so now if I do a flox search Noxter, you'll see that it's a storage visualization tool for CLI on Mac or Linux, which is the description I put in the pure build that wasn't the one that was in the first build. And I can do a show to get just a bit more information. You'll see that I have, some different versions that have been available historically, 0.1.3 and 0.1.3.10. But I can install that again into my other environment, as I demonstrated earlier. So if you haven't been to Flox Hub, it's a collaboration hub for people that want to use environments and packages and have an organization and other setups for sharing, all sorts of Flox content and material. But let's go over here and check out packages and search for Noxter. So I'm going to search over here, and you'll see that Stahnke Noxter is available. It's v0.1.3-10, which was the latest one. If I click on this, I'm going to get an output that's kind of similar to Flox Show, like I did in the command line. You'll see that it has some different versions available, and I can install them at the latest version or at a specific version, and those are all available. And so I can publish packages. For an individual use with Flox, you can publish 5 packages, try them all out. You can use them from your Mac over to your Linux box or different Macs or different Linux workstations or whatever you have that you want to share from. If you want to give your colleagues access, please talk to us because you can get invited to a Flox organization. And if you're in an organization, everybody within that organization can share those packages and environments, and you can have private environments only viewable by your organization. And that's part of our Flox for Teams offering. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please engage with us, and we're happy to teach you and help you learn more about it. So anyway, in summary, what we have here is we have a software package that's not available by default in the Flox catalog that I wanted to make available to myself and perhaps to other team members. To do that, I started with how do I make a build work in a Flox environment? From there, I wrote down those instructions inside of my Flox manifest. I ran Flox build, validated that it worked, and then I ran Flox publish and was able to install it into a different environment, view it on Flox Hub, and go from there. Now, if I find a bunch of utility in that and I really like it, I think I would go talk to my Flox team members, my Flox account manager, and say, hey, I'd like to get the rest of my team enrolled in this so we can all be working together on our custom content. Happy building. Thanks so much.